person may survive a fatal car accident or a building fall. However, it is impossible for someone to survive a hanging execution. This is a strange story, but it is real. So before we dive into the specifics of this interesting story, be prepared to zoom in on the screen and let us have some fun together. John Henry George Lee, dubbed the man they couldn't hang. He was also known as Baba Coombe in the village where he allegedly committed the murder. He was born on August 15, 1864 in the small village of Apat Scarswell, and he was a thief. His father was a miner who married his mother Mary in 1859. She gave birth to a daughter named Elizabeth by another man. John Baba Coombe Lee was 10 or 9 years her junior. After leaving his studies in 1879, John Baba Coombe Lee went to work for Miss Emma Case after his half-sister Elizabeth interceded for him, but he didn't stay long with her before joining the British Royal Navy. He began performing a variety of tasks in South Devon, including serving Colonel Brownlow at his home. After a few months, he stole from the Brownlows and he was sent to Exeter Jail. When Miss Emma Case discovered the young boy who had previously worked for her was incarcerated, she brought him out through an intermediary after 6 months and rehired him as a gardener to take care of the garden and provide other basic chores. They say Miss Emma Case was a friend to Lee's family because his mother and sister used to work for her, which is why their relationship was strong, except for John Baba Coombe Lee, who had a bad relationship with Miss Emma, and one day she informed him that she was gonna reduce his salary because she was dissatisfied with the way he worked and felt he didn't deserve the salary she was paying him. He became enraged and went to his sister, crying, threatening the elderly lady. On the evening of Saturday, November 15, 1884, Miss Emma Case left her second-floor chamber and descended the stairs. Someone suddenly appeared behind her and repeatedly beat her head with an iron. He drew a knife and slit her neck when she fell. She had 4 servants: John Baba Coombe Lee, his sister, and her 2 other servants. After Emma Case was murdered, the murderer attempted to destroy all evidence, including the elderly woman's body, by setting fire to the palace. However, John Baba Coombe Lee unexpectedly emerged from the castle, running to inform his neighbors that Miss Emma Case had died and requesting their assistance in putting out the fire. If it wasn't him, the murderer, then who told him that she had died? Because the palace was set on fire and he didn't see her body. He quickly returned to the palace and assisted the servant lady who has made trapped in an upstairs fire. When the cops arrived at the palace, they detained and interrogated John Baba Coombe Lee. He was accused of murdering Emma Case because he was the only man present, as well as for his strange behavior that evening, recent incarceration, and arm injury. When they asked him, he stated that while recusing the maid, he was shattering the window glass to allow smoke from the fire to escape, which was the second cause of death. When it was discovered that they hadn't initially taken John Lee to trial, many people were concerned. A young Templar lawyer who knew Emma Case offered to take on the case and defamed John Baba Comely because he adored Elizabeth, John Lee's sister, who was at the moment pregnant with an unnamed father. The night of the murder, the Templar was reportedly present at the palace. But how did he vanish? His lawyer, Templar, took ill 2 days before his trial and never fully recovered before he passed away in 1886. Charles took over as his successor. Councilors presented evidence to try and prove John guilty of the murder, for which he maintained his innocence, including the fact that he was the only man in the palace, that he had previously served time in jail for theft-related offenses, that he had a wound on his hand, and that his clothes were stained with blood. Even though the evidence was all unfounded, it was enough to make the claim. Throughout the trial, John Baba Comely maintained his cool, as if he hadn't committed the crime. He made an attempt to convince the jury that there was a second guy in the palace, but no one paid him any attention. As a result, the judge suggested summarizing the case for the jury. Within 40 minutes, the jury returned a guilty verdict. At that point, the judge announced the final ruling, which was death by hanging until the judge's passing. 21 days later, on November 23, 1855, was the day of the execution. He eagerly ate his last meal, which he devoured with relish. John Baba Comely was facing the death penalty, but he was remarkably composed and reciprocated. When his jailer asked him why, he said, "God knows I'm innocent, and because I believe in him, I'm at peace." But 2 days ago, prison director Edwin Kwan ordered that the scaffolding device be repaired and cleaned to see if it was still functional. The scaffolding had been moved from an old prison hospital building and was being used for the first time in this location. However, it was not used during that time, and the machine was thoroughly tested by the executioner, James Berry, and found to be faultless. James Berry informed the warden that he was happy with everything. The prison guards arrived and took John to the execution room, but everyone who saw him said he was going for a walk instead of being executed, because he didn't scream or resist, and they didn't have to drag him there by force. He didn't lose his cool or his resolve for a single second. The gallows was a type of structure that suspended prisoner while they stood on a metal gate that was mechanically attached to a long wooden handle. When the executioner pulled the handle, the door opened downwards, and the prisoner fell into a room beneath the platform to rest from the world's troubles. The prisoner dies instantly when that door is opened. Because gravity is pulling him down, the rope becomes entangled around his neck and snaps. If a person had bad luck, his neck may not break when he falls from the platform. He flops and floats in the air for a little longer until he dies and his soul departs from his body. John Baba Comely had his hands and feet bound. He was wearing a hood over his head and a rope around his neck, but he wasn't afraid, as if he knew he would survive. When James Berry walked back and pulled the lever, the doors opened to kill John Baba Comely. However, what actually happened was unexpected. The doors didn't move an inch. The executioner, James, and the 2 jailers pounded on the doors, but They refused to budge, as if the doors were saying that John Baba Comely wouldn't be hanged. They examined the machine to figure out what was wrong and why the doors didn't move. The carpenter examined the machine and determined that it was in good working order. They returned John Baba Comely, who stood at the doors with the hood over his head, and the executioner James pulled the lever once more, but for the same reason. Everyone was taken aback. The doors open when he walks down. When he rides, the doors hang and don't move. They transferred John Lee to another cell and rechecked the device, and everything went swimmingly. They returned him, and he stood at the door, which became stuck once more. The prison authorities have arrived, and everyone is taken aback by what has occurred. They fought over his trail for the fourth time. However, the jail official postponed the execution and informed the Prime Minister, Sir William Harcourt, who after a decision ordered the sentence to be commuted to life imprisonment, recommending that he not be released. John Lee became famous after this incident. They called him the man they couldn't hang. Musical works, songs, poems, and plays were then written, and wordless silent film were produced in Australia, and these shows were staged for many years. They released John Lee 22 years later, in December 1907, after he maintained his innocence, and they were under constant pressure to reconsider his case. 2 years after his release, he married Jessie, a nurse. They worked and lived together after she gave birth to him in 1910. But then John Lee vanished, and his wife was expecting their second child. But what happened to John after that was a long-standing mystery, and in an instant, he discovered that John Lee had boarded a ship from Southampton bound for America, accompanied by a woman fleeing her marriage named Adelina. She's married to John. They had a daughter in 1914 and lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where their love story began. Evelyn was her given name. However, at the age of 19, she was involved in a tragic accident. They discovered her body on the bathroom floor a week after she started working for Dr. Arthur Kovac in 1933. John Lee died in 1964 at the age of 81, and his widow Adelina died in 1969. They applied for American citizenship but were denied because they were living in the country illegally. But his story didn't end there. Many questions have been raised over the years about whether he was the true murderer of Miss Emma Case, or that there is another criminal, because he maintained his calmness and innocence until the end of his life, even during the trial, entering prison and standing on the execution platform. However, he didn't reveal the secret of his strange behavior on that night of his crime. Some individuals think John Lee is really the murderer, and while some people think he didn't kill Miss Emma Case based on his character, it is also plausible that he knows who did. Another suggestion is that Elizabeth, his sister, murdered her for a specific motive. After learning the truth, John Lee intended to cover it up and offer himself as a sacrifice to keep her. from being hanged. According to legend, the young Templar barrister who fell in love with Elizabeth confessed to the murder of Miss Emma Case on his deathbed in 1986. The more present question is whether the gallows will stop when John rides it, or that a divine miracle saved John from execution because he was not guilty of Miss Emma Case' blood. Write your thoughts in the comment section below until we meet again for another exciting episode. See you later, guys. Bye bye.